Greetings, Patreon tribe. Got a very special exclusive this time out. It's going to be a haul video, and I don't get to do too many haul videos because I don't bring home too many hauls from local toy conventions. But this time out, there was one in my town, and there was a whole bunch of great stuff. The trick to going to toy conventions is actually to go a little bit later. If you go early, you get the rarer stuff, the stuff that everyone's going after. But if you go a couple hours later, even around closing time, a lot of the dealers just want to get rid of this stuff, and they don't want to haul it back to whatever city they came from. So you can get it for a much lower price. So I got quite a few awesome items this time out, and for not that much. And we're going to start with the Dragon Walker from Masters of the Universe. And this one is in beautiful shape. I right away knew I was getting this just by the condition that the sticker was in on the front. They're fantastic, nice paint, minimal, ooh, that's squeaky, minimal paint wear on the sides, and it actually works. So you got to have a figure to have him ride in. So we're gonna stick our He-Man, and this was another purchase I actually picked up at this toy convention, an original He-Man. So the one I have is the commemorative version, and this is one of the original ones. Couldn't pass it up for whatever it was, 10 bucks Canadian. But when I picked this guy up, I asked the dealer, does it work? And he said, I don't know, I haven't tested it, which is why it was so cheap. And took a look at the leads inside. They looked in great condition. Popped some batteries in and it didn't work. So here's a little, I guess they call them pro tips these days. On a lot of old school electronics, the motor is seized. It's not broken, it's just the motor is seized up. And I remember seeing some videos on YouTube about disassembling the whole thing and disassembling the motor and getting it started up. That's a lot of work, and I'm not too good at putting things back together. I can take them apart, but I just can't put them back the way they were. So one of the tricks that I did on my Sectaurs wings, the Spider Flyer and the Dragon Flyer, the wing, the motor had seized up. I just, because it looked from those tutorial videos that all they were doing was manually turning the motor. So I just took the wings in the on position and by myself tried to pump them, and it woke them up. Same thing worked on this thing. It was dead. It wasn't working at all. I turned it on and I just started pushing it back and forth to try to wake up the motor. And as you can see, how cool. How cool is that? Woo. That is awesome. Never owned this one before. And it is awesome. It is one of the wackiest, goofiest Masters of the Universe vehicles out there. Kind of reminds me of the Attack Track with those treads that just flop all over the place. But this thing is absolutely awesome. I love it. As a display piece, it's great, but the fact that it still works is awesome too. And another Masters of the Universe vehicle is, I believe it's called the Road Ripper, but another one in great condition. It's got a working seat belt, so you can stick your figure in. Always wear your seat belt. I love how even, like we always talk about how those old cartoons used to teach valuable moral lessons. They even taught you to wear a seat belt. So it's kind of weird. There's nowhere for the figure to actually hang on to, but you take the zip line, you stick it in there, and then when you pull it out, I don't have much space here to try this out. I guess someday I hope to do a dedicated review on this, but you just pull it and off it goes across the floor. And another one that was in really nice condition. I'm very lucky that in my area, Masters of the Universe, on the downside, doesn't show up very often at these toy conventions, but when it does, there's not a very high demand for it. So that's one of the advantages of living in kind of a mid-sized town instead of a big city, that the prices on some of these vintage toys are still fairly reasonable. Next up is an LJN WWF wrestler that I've been looking at for quite some time, but the price was never right until this past convention. It's Corporal Kirshner. So as the story goes, they were supposed to make a Sergeant Slaughter figure in the WWF LJN Superstars line, and he took off to do G.I. Joe. Right call, in my opinion, all these years later. But they needed an army guy, so they brought in a guy named Corporal Kirshner. And I'll never be able to afford the LJN Slaughter, so this is, I guess, like back in the day, this is once again the next best thing. I was a fan of Corporal Kirshner, even though he didn't really win all that often. But it's cool to have kind of a G.I. Joe looking LJN WWF Superstar now. And next up we've got a RoboCop from RoboCop and the Ultra Police by Kenner. These are rare. I'm not sure why, but all of the Ultra Police figures are really cheap on eBay, even mint on card. But Robo himself is hard to find. I guess there's some loose ones, but they're always missing the helmet. So as soon as I saw the helmet on this guy, I had to get him. And he's also got cap firing action, kind of like some other cops from the 80s. So you can pop in some caps and have him fire them. But I've got a RoboCop from the later horrible Canadian live-action TV show, and I just wanted a vintage Kenner one to stick in my Robo 1 car, so it's cool to have an actual Kenner RoboCop vintage figure, finally. Up next is Chuck Norris. And Chuck Norris in Chuck Norris Karate Commandos. So years ago, I had this one actually, mint on card, and I got him on eBay back when vintage toys weren't valuable collector's items. I picked them up for, $5 or something, and I sold him a few years ago for not much more than that because I was out of space, and it was before I was doing the toy channel, and I just didn't have room and didn't have interest in a Chuck Norris Karate Commandos figure. And when I saw the cartoon, not that it's a great cartoon, but I really regretted getting rid of this one. So you never see these again at the local toy conventions, and when I saw Rubbermaid of Chuck Norris figures, I had to pick up these two. So this is the orange vest Chuck Norris. I guess he does some kind of I don't know if he's got like a karate gimmick or something. I haven't even looked into how these things work, but the paint jobs on them are fantastic. So this is the, I guess the civilian Chuck, and then this is the, looks like he has some sort of karate chop action. But with the legendary status that Chuck Norris has grown to, and just how goofy that intro is, Chuck Norris and Chuck Norris are Chuck Norris in Chuck Norris Karate Commandos. So I'll find a space to stick these guys somewhere in the toy collection. And a couple of good old boys, never meaning no harm. I've got them Duke boys and the Generally Jump car, and finally got these guys to go along with it. It's good old Uncle Jesse. These are Mego 3 3/4 figures, and these clamshells are a little hard to open sometimes. And good old Cooter. So the hood, I believe, opens on that Generally. And I always wanted a Cooter, just working on the engine. So that'll be cool to have these two to add to the little Duke's corner in the 80s Toy Museum. And to finish off, a couple of loose Cobra figures. So I've always been a Joe guy, and I've never really wanted to get all of the loose Cobras again, even though I had most of them as a kid. But I gotta admit, they do look better when I'm reviewing the vintage vehicles instead of using the modern figures. So I decided at the last couple of shows that I was going to get all of the vintage Cobras again that I had before, and even just to review them individually. So, it's kind of funny. Even though I haven't wanted them for several years, when I actually have them, holding them in my hand, it comes back to me. Like, I remember playing with these guys for countless hours as a kid. I've always said you can't have a hero without a villain. You can't have a strong hero without a strong villain, a strong adversary. And these guys are awesome. This is a Cobra Officer right here. Amazing paint job. It's really incredible how many loose G.I. Joe figures look fantastic when you buy them at these toy shows. And I keep saying, like, didn't anybody play with their toys Or maybe they did and they just made so many of these things that they made enough for people to play with them and also have a nice mint on card version. But here's another one I had as a kid. It's the Cobra Bat. So he is complete. Didn't notice that. Some of the pegs inside his backpack are broken. So I think I still have my original Cobra Bat backpack. So that's not a big deal. I'll just be able to find that and use that in this guy instead. But Cobra Bat was one of the coolest later figures. He's got a little kind of almost a hologram or a lenticular thing on his chest. It doesn't really change that much, but they were experimenting with the chest hologram. So this guy, I guess, might be considered a prototype or a precursor to the Visionaries. And he had a removable joint thing on his hand so that you could take off his hand and put on a claw and all sorts of different little gimmicks. So that's Cobra Trooper or Cobra Officer, Cobra Bat, and then finally, this was an interesting one. I think this is a Black Major custom. The Snake Eyes that I have, the 83 Snake Eyes, is really beat up. It looks like he's been run over by a car a couple of times. So I've been looking for one that's in a little better shape. And this is a straight repro of 83 Snake Eyes, since he has swivel arm battle grip. But he's got a Cobra symbol on his chest. So the guy who was selling him said he thought it was a Black Major repro. It looks exactly like the original, just it's a little looser. Brand new, but loose. A little flimsier. And this is, when I picked him up, I thought, this is exactly what a Hasbro reissue line of G.I. Joes would be like. It feels lighter. I mean, it's very slight, but definitely lighter feeling plastic. Softer just a little bit, and everything is loose. You see a little bit of flash in here, a little bit of runoff. For what it cost, I mean, I think it was $5 or something like that. Awesome price for what you get. So I would still buy up all of these if Hasbro did a reissue line this quality. But just for the shelf, I think I might just take some rubbing alcohol or Goo Gone to that chest, get rid of that Cobra symbol, and basically have a fresh, minty 1983 Snake Eyes. And the last Joe figure is this guy, Windmill, I think his name is. I don't know, I gotta look him up, but he's ugly. He is really ugly. The orange pants, the bright lime chartreuse almost jacket, the headgear isn't doing him any favors, but I don't have him. And whenever I see a Joe that from the 80s, I believe this guy was from the late 80s or early 90s, I've always got a little more space on my Joe shelf, so I can squeeze them in there, and it's just cool to have another original Real American Hero G.I. Joe figure to add to the collection. And since he'll be in the back, at least his pants won't be all that visible. But, you know, and I love pilot figures too, so it's hard to say no to a really affordable G.I. Joe pilot figure. So that's my haul from the latest local toy show. It was a really fun time, and it's even more fun. The fun just keeps continuing when you get to go home and open up your bag and you have all these awesome toys, all this great swag to bring home and do a 360 with. And it really reminds me of when I first got back into toy collecting 15 years ago or so, being able to get a bunch of cool stuff for a really affordable price too. So it's cool when you get a big ticket item, but I always bite my knuckle. I always go, that hurt the bank account. And I just love getting a bunch of cool stuff that I've been looking for a long time for a great price too. So if you have a local toy show in your area, check it out. Often, you never know what you're going to find. Try to go later. You might get really good deals there. And if you don't know how to find your local toy shows in Ontario, which is where I am, I just Google Ontario toy shows, toy conventions, and there's a website with all of them listed there. So whatever province or state you're in or country, do the same, Google, and you might be surprised. You might actually have a whole bunch of them going on local to you, or maybe just even a half-hour drive or not much more. further away from you. And thanks to everyone who shared pictures from conventions that they've gone to in their area too. I really love seeing pictures from conventions all around the world. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Also wanted to bring up, a couple of people are letting me know that the community tab is missing sometimes. I believe that is either Patreon doing maintenance on the site, or it could be a problem with the individual phones. So whenever the community tab is missing, it's important to do a little bit of troubleshooting on your end too. Try, if you're on a phone, which is usually what's the problem, because I've never seen the community tab missing on my laptop or on my desktop computer ever. Anytime I'm using an actual web browser, it's always there. So if it's missing on your app on your phone, try to use a web browser like Chrome on your phone to access Patreon, and you might see that it shows up there again. It might just be an issue with the app, or try a laptop or a desktop, and it should show up there. And if it keeps happening, I'll let Patreon know again, but usually the response is we're doing maintenance. So if that happens, it should be back in a couple of hours. And I also wanted to thank everyone for dropping by my first live stream, which was an absolute blast. Sorry I couldn't get to each and every single comment, but every time I saw one of the Patreon tribe show up there to say hi, it was awesome. Great knowing that you tuned in, even if just to drop by to say hi. So we're going to be doing more of those often. They're a lot of fun, and hope to see you come out to those as well. So thanks for watching. Thanks for being part of the Patreon tribe. And until next time, Nerdmas stay.